1997, Boston, the Macworld Conference. Apple Computer is dying, not struggling, not going through a rough patch, dying. The stock is sitting at $3.30 a share. The company has lost over $1 billion in the previous 12 months. Their market share has collapsed from 16% to 3%. Suppliers are cutting them off. Retailers are pulling their products. The press has written the obituary so many times, it's practically a template. And on this day, in front of an audience of Apple faithful, the people who had believed in this company through everything, something happens that nobody in that room will ever forget. Bill Gates appears on the screen, not in the room. On a giant video screen, beamed in from Microsoft headquarters. The CEO of the company that had spent a decade humiliating Apple, outmaneuvering Apple, taking everything Apple had built and selling a cheaper version of it to the rest of the world. Looming over the stage in Boston like a conqueror acknowledging a defeated enemy. The crowd booed, loudly, the sound of thousands of people who had given years of loyalty to a brand watching that brand accept a lifeline from its greatest rival. And Steve Jobs, standing on that stage, 30 days back as interim CEO of the company he had founded and been thrown out of, smiled. Because Steve Jobs understood something in that moment that almost nobody else in that room did. That the Microsoft deal wasn't a surrender, it was a tourniquet. And before you can rebuild anything, you have to stop the bleeding. What happened next, in the years between that booing crowd and the moment Apple became the most valuable company in the history of human commerce, is one of the most extraordinary corporate stories ever told. This is how a company with 90 days of cash left became worth $3 trillion. To understand how Apple almost died, you have to understand how it was born. And the birth is exactly what you'd expect from a story that ends in $3 trillion, improbable, slightly chaotic, and driven by someone who saw something nobody else could see yet. 1976, a garage in Los Altos, California. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak build the Apple I, a circuit board, not a finished product, a circuit board sold to hobbyists who would build their own casing around it. Revenue in year one, $774,000, not a fortune, but proof that someone would pay for what they were making. Wozniak was the engineer, the technical genius who could design hardware that other people could barely understand. Jobs was something different, and the something different is the part that matters for this story. Jobs was not a technical genius, he was a product visionary. He understood, with an almost frightening clarity, not just what a product should do, but what it should feel like, how it should make the person using it feel about themselves. The Apple II turned that vision into a real business. The first true mass-market personal computer, launched in 1977. It came in a proper casing, it had color graphics, it looked like something a person might actually want to own. Revenue grew from that $700,000 start into the hundreds of millions. Apple went public in 1980. It was the largest IPO since Ford Motor Company in 1956. Jobs, at 25 years old, was worth over $200 million. And then 1984. The year Apple stopped being a technology company and became something closer to a cultural force. The 1984 Super Bowl ad cost $1.5 million to make and run, an almost incomprehensible figure for a television advertisement at the time. It aired once. It depicted a dystopian world of gray conformity, shattered by a single act of defiance. It didn't show the computer. It didn't list the features. It sold an idea that the Macintosh wasn't just a product. It was a statement about who you were and what you believed. The Mac launched days later. The world changed. Not immediately, not overnight, but the direction was set. Personal computing now had an aesthetic, an identity, a sense of meaning that IBM and its clones simply didn't carry. Here is the moment the story turns dark, and it turns dark not because of a market force or a technological disruption. It turns dark because of a decision Steve Jobs made himself, a decision he would spend the next decade paying for. In 1983, Jobs recruited John Sculley to be Apple's CEO. Sculley was the president of PepsiCo, a consummate marketer, an experienced executive, a man with the corporate credibility that Jobs felt Apple needed as it scaled. The pitch Jobs gave him has become one of the most famous lines in business history. Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world? Scully came. 2 years later, Scully went to the Apple board and told them that Steve Jobs had to go. The two men had clashed repeatedly over strategy, over direction, over the fundamental question of what Apple was trying to be. The board sided with Scully. In 1985, Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple Computer, the man who had built everything the company was removed from operational control of his own company. He was 30 years old. Jobs left. He founded a new computer company called Next. High-end workstations for the academic and business market. He acquired a small computer graphics division from Lucasfilm for $5 million and renamed it Pixar. And he built, largely in silence, while the company he had founded proceeded to lose its way in the most comprehensive manner possible. 12 years. That is how long Apple spent trying to exist without Steve Jobs. And those 12 years are a case study in what happens to a company when it loses the one thing that made it coherent. Under Scully, Apple expanded in every direction simultaneously. At one point, the company had over 350 different products. 350. Printers, cameras, PDAs, multiple Mac lines, with names that even Apple's own sales staff couldn't keep straight. The idea, presumably, was that more products meant more revenue. The reality was that more products meant no products that anyone cared deeply about, manufactured by a company that no longer had a clear sense of what it was for. The Newton was the most spectacular example. Launched in 1993, it was a personal digital assistant, a handheld device meant to recognize handwriting and manage your schedule. The concept was genuinely ahead of its time. The execution was genuinely terrible. The handwriting recognition, which was the central feature, didn't work reliably. Doonesbury ran a comic strip mocking it. Saturday Night Live mocked it. At $700 for a device that couldn't reliably read what you wrote into it, the Newton became shorthand for Apple's decline, an expensive, ambitious, broken product from a company that had lost the ability to finish what it started. By 1996, Gil Amelio had taken over as CEO. His first year saw the stock drop 27%. Meanwhile, Windows 95 had launched and sold 7 million copies in its first 5 weeks. Microsoft wasn't just winning the market, it was lapping Apple entirely. The board, in desperation, began looking at acquisitions that might provide Apple with a modern operating system. Its existing system was aging and failing to keep pace with what Windows was delivering. They nearly acquired B Inc., the company founded by a former Apple executive. At the last moment, the deal fell apart. And in that moment of maximum desperation, someone remembered Next. In December 1996, Apple acquired Next for $429 million. The official reason was the operating system. Next had built sophisticated modern software that could form the foundation of Apple's next generation of products. But everyone in Silicon Valley understood what had actually been purchased. They didn't buy a company, they bought back their founder. Jobs returned to Apple in a role officially described as advisor. Within months, Amelio was gone. Jobs was named interim CEO. He insisted on the interim, refused a salary above $1 a year, and immediately began doing what everyone who knew him understood he would do. He started cutting. 350 products became 4. That's not a simplification or a metaphor. It is literally what happened. Jobs drew a 2x2 grid on a whiteboard. Consumer, professional, desktop, portable. 4 boxes, 4 products. Everything else, every printer, every camera, every peripheral, every product line that had accumulated during 12 years of directionless expansion was canceled. The internal reaction was exactly what you'd expect. 3,000 employees were laid off in 90 days. Executives who had built careers on the canceled product lines objected, argued, threatened to leave. Jobs, famously, let them go. His view was unambiguous. A company that tries to be everything to everyone becomes nothing to anyone. Apple needed to be something specific, done perfectly, or it needed to stop existing.
The Microsoft deal closed. $150 million. Jobs stood on stage at Macworld and told the audience the thing they didn't want to hear, but needed to. We have to let go of the idea that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose.
It was not a comfortable message, but it was the correct one. Apple at that moment could not afford ideology. It could only afford survival. Then came the marketing, the Think Different campaign, $100 million, which for a company on the edge of bankruptcy was an act of either extraordinary conviction or extraordinary recklessness, possibly both. The ads showed Einstein, Gandhi, Picasso, Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King. Not a single Apple product appeared in any of them. Just faces. Just the logo. Just the words. Think different. The campaign didn't sell a computer. It re-established an identity. It reminded the world, and more importantly, reminded Apple's own employees and customers what Apple was supposed to stand for, not features, not specifications, the belief that the tools you use say something about who you are. If you want to understand how branding works at its highest level, study that campaign. It is the textbook. This is the kind of story we cover every week on this channel. The decisions that look insane in the moment and inevitable in hindsight. If you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button. Because what comes next is where this story goes from remarkable to almost impossible to believe. August 1998, the iMac, translucent plastic, Bondi blue, a computer that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that objects have emotional relationships with the people who use them. You could see through it, you could see the components inside. It was friendly, it was strange, it was completely unlike anything else on the market. 800,000 units sold in the first 139 days. Not 800,000 over a year, not 800,000 across a product line. 800,000 of one computer, in one color, in 4.5 months. The stock moved. $3.30 became $9, then $16, then $29. Within 2 years of jobs returning, Apple had gone from a company with 90 days of cash to a company with a growing balance sheet, a product people were excited about, and a brand that had been restored to something approaching its former power. And Jobs was only warming up. 2001, the iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. The line is so well known now that it's easy to forget how radical the framing was at the time. Jobs didn't say a music player with 1 gigabyte of storage. He translated a specification into a feeling. 1,000 songs, in your pocket. The product sold itself in 7 words. The iPod transformed Apple's revenue base and introduced the company to an entirely new category of customer. They'd seen named or customer. People who had never bought a Mac and had no intention of doing so but who wanted that device. The halo effect pulled millions of new customers toward the Apple ecosystem for the first time.
2007, the iPhone, the product that changed everything, not just for Apple, but for the entire technology industry, and arguably for human life as it is lived in the 21st century. Jobs stood on stage in January 2007 and announced that Apple was introducing 3 new products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. Then he paused. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device.
The smartphone market existed before the iPhone. BlackBerry dominated the enterprise segment. Nokia sold hundreds of millions of handsets. Palm had a loyal following. Within 5 years, all of them were marginalized or gone. The iPhone didn't enter an existing market. It replaced it. 2010. The iPad. A category that didn't exist, created from whole cloth, that became the best-selling consumer electronics product of its era. By 2011, the year Steve Jobs died at 56 from pancreatic cancer, Apple was the most valuable company on Earth. Market capitalization, $363 billion. The same company that Microsoft had rescued with $150 million 14 years earlier. The same company with a stock price of $3.30. $3.30 to $3 trillion. That is the arc of this story. So, what does the Apple comeback actually teach us? Because it's easy to say hire a visionary or focus your product line and treat that as the lesson, but the real lesson is more uncomfortable than that. Apple almost died because it confused activity with progress. 350 products looked like a company working hard to serve its customers. It was actually a company that had lost the ability to say no. That had allowed short-term revenue thinking to crowd out the long-term question of what it was actually trying to build. Jobs came back and the first thing he did was not add, he subtracted. aggressively, ruthlessly, at enormous human and financial cost. He made the company smaller before he made it larger. He made it clear before he made it more ambitious. The iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, none of those products were possible until Apple stopped spreading itself across 350 things it was doing badly. Every great comeback in business history follows this pattern. Subtract before you add. The clarity comes from what you remove, not what you introduce. The question worth sitting with, the one that applies to every organization, every career, every creative project, is this. What are you holding on to right now that is taking up the space where something great could exist? Apple had the answer. It cost them 12 years, $1 billion in losses, and the humiliation of a Microsoft rescue to find it. From $3.30 to $3 trillion. That is what subtraction looks like, at scale, done perfectly.
This is the Boardroom Files, where empires rise, scandals break, and the truth is always in the fine print.